Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Los Angeles. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas, and we are just about underway in the fourth round here. Willie Adel playing Obzon versus Seth Manfield on blue-black control. So two decks that we did see at the Pro Tour last weekend, and a nice start here for Willie Adel. I believe he's only got two Thoughtseize in the deck. I don't think he's running Despise, so a turn one hand removal here is pretty decent, especially since it's Thoughtseize.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the blue-black deck has no turn one plays except for hand disruption. There's a chance that Willie would have played a tap land if he had it. I don't know what his hand is. Maybe his hand doesn't have any two drops, in which case you want to play Thoughtseize on one, tap land on two. But the more common play with Thoughtseize on the play is to play a tap land on turn one, unless, again, you're worried about specific one drops from your opponent. But at this point, I mean, unless Willie knows what Seth's playing, you know, he wouldn't have that information.
What did he take?
He took the Silence the Believers, leaving Seth with 2 Heroes Downfalls and 4 lands, which is not an impressive hand, but it's the kind of hand that when you draw Dig on turn 5 looks a lot better.
Now Willie took Silence the Believers because that's the only way that Seth can really get ahead, further than a 1-for-1 there?
Right. I think partially because, Heroes Downfall and Silence are so close, especially when you have multiples of them, because let's say Willie took Heroes Downfall, Seth can still go turn 3 Downfall, turn 4 Silence, which is about the same as turn 3 Downfall, turn 4 Downfall, except that Silence becomes great on 7. Okay. So you might as well take it. If there was, 2 Silence and 1 Heroes Downfall, I could see it going the other way around.
Right.
Of course, Willie's not doing much.
Yeah, he's not doing much. He's played a Sandstep Citadel and now just sort of moving forward with his mana development here. But Seth Manfield now has 2 blue mana up here and of course a third one as well. So he can represent Dissolve or any number of spells. Of course, he knows about the Hero's Downfall in his hand as well. So let's see what Willie comes up with here for turn 4. This is a big turn for him. If he's got something like a Sorin or a Planeswalker of some sort, does he run those in this deck?
Yeah, he's got 2 Sorins. My guess is this is a Siege Rhino. That's the most likely scenario.
Yeah, there it is, Siege Rhino. And do you expect this to get instantly killed?
If Seth doesn't have a counterspell, which he might use it here because Siege Rhino is one of the few cards that kind of gets better against removal. But if he doesn't have one, he's fine Heroes Downfalling it. You want to use your mana. It's also worth noting there's an Urborg in play, so Seth doesn't have to sacrifice his Pluto Delta. Willie chose to sacrifice Windswept Heath, but I mean that's maybe he thinks that he needs to thin his deck at this point because he had all the right colors available.
He does look a little flooded. Didn't do anything until turn 4 after that turn 1 Thoughtseize. And here's a Wingmate Rock, but with no raid, so he's just playing the 3/4 flying side of it, and it's going to get immediately killed as well.
Yeah. Generally, I like to hold my fetch lands when I have Urborg out in a deck with Courser of Kruphix. Willie has Coursers. But if you don't have a Courser and you don't anticipate casting one anytime soon, like you have a Curve, then you might as well just wait because, or sack the fetch land immediately so you have a less chance of drawing lands. Overall, I think the advantage on waiting is a little bit better, but...
All right, here's Temple of Malady for Willie Adel. Puts the card back on top and has a follow-up Wingmate Rock that's going to do a decent job of blocking the Prognostic Sphinx there.
Well, yeah, it will, except Seth still gets to scry for 3, and this is a great situation for Seth. I mean, the way this game is developed is really good for him. He's playing a deck with 4 Dig Through Times and a bunch of good late-game cards like Silence the Believers, whereas, Willie's deck is not pressuring Seth in any way. Seth's getting to scry with the Sphinx at this point, and even if Seth doesn't have a removal spell, this sequence of attacks is still better for him because he's still such a high life total, whereas Willie's not really accomplishing much, and if Seth has a removal spell, he can now scry and then see what he's drawing and then kill the Wingmate Rock before blocks if he so desires.
Couldn't quite see what the split was. He did put some amount of cards on the bottom there.
Yeah, it looks like he put 1 card on the bottom, and...
Geez, just passes a turn with all the mana up as well.
Yeah, which represents a ton of different cards. I mean, the deck's full of Dissolves and Disdainful Strokes and Heroes Downfall, and he could even cast Dig Through Time here without even sacrificing Polluted Delta. He could just pay 5 and exile 3.
Wow.
And once the Dig Through Times start, I mean, this is the deck that wants to chain Dig Through Times the most.
Okay.
The Jeskai deck often will dig looking for just 2 burn spells or 2 threats or whatever, whereas, the blue-black control deck, it just wants to dig into more digs.
All right, there's another Wingmate Rock, but this one's going to get dissolved.
And Wingmate Rock's an amazing card. It's one of the reasons that the Obzon deck is so good, and Willie, I think, correctly plays 4. Counterspells are one of the few ways to actually make it so it's not a 2-for-1.
Right.
And again, when you're running a deck full of Dissolves and, Dig Through Times, like having it be like turn 7 with you at 17 and the board at basically parity with you actually even having a slight edge because your Sphinx is better than the Rock. That's exactly where blue-black wants to be. And exactly the kind of game it, kind of dominates in. Whereas the games where there's Fleecebane line into Courser, into Siege Rhino, those are games where it gets behind and has no really good mechanism to sweep the board.
All right, here it is, Dig Through Time number 1. And this is the good part when you're sitting in Seth Manfield's seat. Just 7 cards, so many.
Yeah, and even if he has a land in hand, this lets him, decide what cards he wants,
Double
whether he wants to take a land.
Thoughtseize, dissolve. Looks like he's going to take the dissolve.
From this, it looks like you take dissolve for sure. If you don't have an untapped land, you could actually just take a land here. If you do have an untapped land, taking one of the Bioblights does seem a little better than a Thoughtseize.
Yeah, they're both tap. All 3 of those were tap lands. Oh no, is there an Urborg out? Yeah, so I guess none of them are tap lands.
So, Seth, if he's got a land here, it makes the dissolve a little bit better. But
Yeah,
even if he doesn't, there's not a whole lot Willie can resolve that's, super insane.
No.
So Seth's an interesting spot. I actually think he wants to sacrifice the Delta here.
Okay.
Because he's going to scry with Prognostic Sphinx now, but if he wants to cast Dissolve, he's going to have to sack the Delta anyway.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Tight play from Seth Manfield here. That's one of those ones that could be easy to overlook until you play the deck a few times.
Yeah, I've never played the deck. I'm just really good at this. You bring out the best.
I hope you guys are ready for that this weekend.
It's literally only when I do commentary with Marshall.
I know that. I'm keenly aware. It's because I bring the best out. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a compliment to me.
So Seth looks like he left 1 on top there.
Okay.
And really, all you're looking for now is digs and counter spells. I mean, removal's fine too. But you want to make sure you don't end up in a spot where a Wingmate Rock resolves, and then you end up having to use too many removal spells. Though I guess Willie's only on 1 more Wingmate Rock in his whole deck, and we know Seth has a dissolve in his hand.
So Willie attacks, gets a trigger, and passes the turn back with no play. And Seth Manfield continues to craft the top of his deck to his liking.
Who do you think wins the race at, attacking for 3 and gaining 1 versus attacking for 3 and scrying 3?
Scry 3, not close.
Yeah.
Especially because Wingmate Rock dies to like every single piece of removal Seth has outside of Bioblight.
And there we have it. Willie having enough of this. The fact that Seth's also using Silence the Believers, his best removal spell on the Wingmate Rock, shows how unconcerned he is with what Willie can do.
So interesting, the basics of that game then, Luis, looked like it was Willie with a slow start. Seth was able to just not be under any pressure whatsoever as they entered the middle part of the game, and he just powered through to the late game.
Yeah, and that's really where the blue-black deck dominates. It's you're able to, trade 1 for 1 and get to a point where you're not dying, and then you just start casting dig 3 times. And the blue-black deck's weakness is that against a fast start, it again doesn't have anything like end hostilities. That's like one of the better white cards for this kind of archetype. It has no end hostilities. When Willie has 3 creatures out, Seth's got to just 1 for 1 them, taking hits from all the other ones. But if games like that where Willie got nothing into play, then Seth's just gonna, Hero's Downfall, maybe even take 3 hits from a rock before Hero's Downfalling, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
And then dig into more dissolves and keep the board clear. And that whole game, Seth also had the option of just not attacking with Sphinx if he wanted to stop, pump the brakes on the race, but he didn't really even need to.
Looks like a bunch of cards for Willie here.
Willie actually doesn't.
What does his sideboard look
He doesn't
like
actually
here?
have a ton to side in this matchup. I mean, he's got
a couple of Thoughtseize.
Thoughtseize and Liliana Vest is definitely good, but other than that, I mean, Elspeth is a decent threat against 1 for 1 removal, but I mean, you could bring in End Hostilities to kill Prognostic Sphinx. That seems like a kind of weak counterplay because it kills any of your own creatures in play too.
Right.
And I mean, Willie on the plus side gets to take out cards that are a little more dead. Like he's not really going to want, like Bioblight, for example, is just completely dead.
Right.
So Willie, improves based on that, but it's not a huge leap. It's not like, in the old standard when you had a Blue-White Sphinx's Revelation deck, those decks got so much worse after board because the mono black decks board 10 cards. Because it controls such a smaller portion of the field right now, Willie doesn't have 10 good cards to bring in. I mean, he has three good cards and a couple of decent cards to bring in, which isn't bad, but it's not like he's swinging the matchup by 15% or anything along those lines.
Okay, why don't we take a look at a live look-in on our secondary table here. Efro, Eric Froelich versus Alex Majleton.
And Efro's the one with the Efro token.
Yeah, he's...
And Efro's the one who I assume is winning because it looks like a dig through time is resolving.
So it looks like Majleton's on Jeskai here.
Yeah, it looks like the Jeskai mirror. And game 1, I would not expect an opponent to have much that could stop a dig through time from resolving. Though depending on what the life totals are, I mean, that Jeskai charm could be, pretty threatening.
Could be interesting here.
In general,
Eric's at 6, and Eric's is no longer alive.
Yeah, there's not much Eric could have dug through time to find, but still no reason to take chances. You might as well burn your opponent in response.
All right, so Majleton takes game 1 versus Efro. That's his nickname, over on the other table. And we're back on our main match here. Seth Manfield on the left. Again, he's won a Grand Prix in his day.
Yeah, I mean, he won a Grand Prix back in Daytona Beach in 2007. The first year I played, got on the train.
Is that right?
And then he won a Grand Prix last year also.
Yeah.
Kansas City, I believe.
Yeah,
so,
one was modern, I think, and one was
he
limited?
won. Daytona was limited. It was Lorman Block limited, and then the modern GP he won was with Birthing Pod.
Right. Which is a pretty big range, right? Like, sealed and draft all the way up to modern.
Well, Seth's just a very good player, and so
very good, yeah.
The way Magic works right now, you don't have any limited specialists. Like Ben Stark might call himself a limited specialist, or rather other people call him a limited specialist, but you can't do well at the Pro Tour unless you know how to play both limited and constructed, and have a pretty wide range because you play a lot of different formats. And, like I mentioned before, Ben had the best record and standard at the Pro Tour of anyone.
Yeah.
He didn't make top 8 because of limited. So which is kind of funny.
I think it's funny how much you like to say it.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say Ben, has made a little bit of fun of me over the years about limited, because the answer would be he's made a lot. But even he will admit that I've somewhat improved, with a dubious look on his face. Let's just say when we were doing drafts at the house, I was taking Treasure Cruise maybe a little bit higher than I should have.
I suffer the same affliction, Luis. Now Seth's opponent is Willie Adel, a very accomplished professional player from Brazil.
Yeah, it's 4 Pro Tour top 8s.
Yeah, his name pops up occasionally in the Hall of Fame discussions.
He actually got a lot of votes last year.
He did.
I think if nobody else on the cusp ends up, breaking out with another like PT top 8 this year, I think there's a pretty good chance that Willie gets in. And I think a lot of that is on the strength of his community organization and community building, just because he's done a lot of that in Brazil. I mean, Brazil, it is difficult to play Magic from Brazil, as he can attest to, but there's been a lot of Brazilian players who have had a decent amount of success. There's a core group that goes to a lot of the tournaments.
Yeah, and all of them. He's like the godfather down there. They always pay homage to Willie, say that he helped him out with cards, whatever. All right, there's Despise to kick things off for Seth Manfield. He's going to see a Fleecemane Lion, a Sorin, and then 4 cards that he can't choose, 3 of them being lands, 1 being a Hero's Downfall. You surprised to see Hero's Downfall in there for Willie?
No, not because it's good, but because he doesn't have enough cards to board out.
Okay.
I mean, I think Hero's Downfall still taps a Sphinx. It's better than an actual blank card. So
it's twiddle.
Yeah, it is not good. Well, you make Seth discard a card as well.
Oh, right, sure.
So what Seth's going to despise here, I mean, you want to take the Sorin because Sorin's a 2-for-1. But if you don't have an answer to Fleecemane Lion, you kind of don't want to get hit for 9 before you find one. So
now, what are the chances Seth doesn't have an answer to a card like Fleecemane Lion post?
Well, if his hand is something like Dissolve, Disdainful Stroke, Despise, and lands, which is a very keepable hand, he just takes the Lion and then he has Disdainful Stroke and Dissolve for Sorin.
Gotcha.
If he doesn't have a counter but instead has a Bioblight, he could just take the Sorin instead.
All right, so he did take the Lion. So that might give us some information about what's in hand for Seth Manfield here. And there's a Scryland for Willie Adel. He's going to ship it down to the bottom and pass a turn back. So nothing of consequence turn 2 here from Willie Adel.
I like that the life gain lands have actually seen play.
It's pretty cool.
The 2-color decks tend to play them.
And here's the Thoughtseize now from Willie. You mentioned this last time. This is actually turn 3 for Willie, but wow.
Seth needs to draw a land here.
He does not have lands, yeah. So that's Jace's Ingenuity, Hero's Downfall, Dig Through Time, Silence of Believers, Dissolve, and another Downfall.
I think that
a lot of action.
Yeah, given that Willie is planning on playing Sorin next turn, he can take the Dissolve, so that means if Seth drew a land, Seth won't be able to counter it. He could just take the Dig Through Time and play for the longer game, because Dig is, the most dangerous card after that. I don't think it makes sense to take any of the removal spells. But given that Jace's Ingenuity and Dig kind of overlap so much, my guess is that he wants to take Dissolve just to make sure Sorin resolves, even if Seth draws a land. If Seth doesn't draw a land, Willie could just run away with the game very quickly.
Yes.
But that's on the table no matter what he takes. So you don't need to plan for that scenario. The scenarios where you're winning, you don't need to worry about it as much. But, worst case, what happens? Seth draws an island or a polluted delta. In that case, you'd rather have, I think, taken Dissolve over Dig. Again, just double Downfall, so you don't really need to do that.
All right, looks like Willie comes to the same conclusion that you did, Luis, and takes the dissolve. And unfortunately, Willie still doesn't have any play for the turn other than another scry land here. He's left that one back on top as well, though, so we should see something pretty great on turn 4. And well, it does give him that's a Radiant Fountain, which is kind of a cute addition that helps against Jeskai or any type of aggro or burn deck, but it does give him access to Hero's Downfall here.
Yeah, so Sorin, if Willie has not drawn a better play than Sorin, and honestly I can't imagine very many that are better, because if you play a Siege Rhino, it's just getting downfalled for basically no profit, because the 3 life swing doesn't really matter that much. If you play Sorin, immediately make a 2/2, and then the Sorin gets downfalled, you still end up with a 2/2 in play, and Seth's playing a deck that can't kill it for free. He eventually has to deal with it.
He actually has to use a card on it.
It also triggers the raid on Wingmate Rock, which is very relevant because Willie has Seth on a bunch of removal spells and no counter spells right now. Like, we know Seth does not have a counter spell in hand.
All right, so we knew that was coming. There's Hero's Downfall to take care of Sorin, and let's see how Seth manages to deal with this vampire and when.
There's a chance that Seth should just Hero's Downfall the vampire.
Snap it off right now.
It's painful, and if Wingmate Rock didn't exist, you wouldn't do it. But because you're in such bad shape to Wingmate Rock, just killing the vampire makes sense.
Yeah. I'm not shocked to see that, though. I have to admit, I would be surprised if you told me that before the tournament. All right, and there's a Siege Rhino to follow up. The way is clear for Willie Adel as well, with Seth Manfield tapped out here. So he's got a nice threat on the battlefield that's going to have to be dealt with at some time, and Seth's got to find lands quickly here.
And it looks like Seth doesn't have land. He could still have a Hero's Downfall pre-combat, but it does not appear he does.
He doesn't have either of them. So this is going to be tight. This next draw step, wow, and another Siege Rhino. Remember, you talked about it, Luis. Seth's deck does not have a way to get both of those at once, right? Like, he's got Silence of Believers for 100 mana, but like, there's no sweeper. And wow, nice hand for Willie. So Thoughtseize from Seth Manfield reveals
it's just peak. He just wanted to see what else Willie had going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even if, let's say Seth drew a land that turn, he could Silence the Believers 1 Rhino, get hit down a 9, and then he'd have to have another removal spell in hand in order to stop the other Rhino from killing him. But
and that's to say nothing of anything that Willie could play on his turn during that sequence, too.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the biggest weakness for Blue-Black, and this is something we identified before the Pro Tour as well, was that the deck needs to hit land drops like 1 through 6 at the very minimum, and really realistically wants to go further than that. But it doesn't have a cheap way to draw extra cards and can't tap out for a card like Divination. I'm not saying that makes the deck bad, because the deck isn't bad, but that is how you lose games. Is something like what happened with Seth, is where you keep a hand of all 3 and 4 mana spells, and then you kind of get stalled in land for a turn, and then once you're behind the counter spells, of which you're playing 6, 7, 8, they stop doing basically anything. So the deck does not play well from behind, but it does a good job of making sure it doesn't get behind.
Right. Yeah, I've played a bunch of decks like that one, of Blue-Black, and decks that really lean heavily on counter spells to try to keep parity, and this one looks like it's on a pretty razor-thin edge as far as that goes. I've definitely seen this deck fall behind quickly and just never recover. We talked about it earlier with Randy. If your opponent somehow has some aggressive 1 and 2 drops, like, this deck really folds.
Yeah, and there aren't that many
cards. Sweet hat back there.
That it is. That would be Sam Party. I can tell because he's playing Nathan Holiday.
I guarantee he lost some type of friendly wager for that.
He did. I remember hearing about this, actually.
Oh, this is too good. It's party time.
It definitely is party time.
Look at this guy.
And it's not like his opponent, Nathan Holiday, is not distinctive as well, just by virtue of being. I remember watching Nathan Holiday when he got second at Grand Prix Phoenix doing commentary for that, and you could always tell which side Nathan Holiday was on. He's good. Let's just say he out-hairs most of his opponent, pretty dramatically.
Significantly, yeah.
It's awesome, though. I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's cool, too. And, yeah, he had a great season last season. 3 GP top 8s for Nathan. He's and a win included. He's really made a nice splash, looking to try to level up to where you're at.
Well, I mean, the first step is getting to play at all the Pro Tours. Not worrying about an invite is really important if you want to kind of progress the level you're at.
Right.
And I think, Nathan's at the point where when you don't have to worry about grinding into every Pro Tour, you can devote more time to the Pro Tours, to getting better at Magic, to going to Grand Prix, and all those things really help. I can't expect Willie to have sideboarded much. Again, I think given that he even has any Heroes Downfalls left in his deck at all, he's kind of maxed out on options. Seth actually has a number of different ways he could go. I mean, whether he wants a card like Dark Betrayal or even like Negate or more Thought Seizes is kind of up in the air. It also could depend on, on the play, counterspells are so much better, and whereas being on the draw, it's not as relevant.
So Sam Pardee actually won his match 2-0. So the pink hat is victorious over Nathan Holiday. Their teammates as well, they had to be pretty bummed to be paired up. Have you had that happen to you?
Yeah, I mean,
sit across from Cheon or something?
We have a big enough team that we
sure,
play each other a fair amount in the early rounds.
Of course. Are you always disappointed when that happens?
Yeah, you don't want to play teammates because, after every round, you hope you both get a win. And when you play each other, only one of you is getting a win. So my solution to that is when I play a teammate to make the match as unpleasant as possible for them. So it's like we both got a loss.
Well, at least it's fair.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are, Ifro versus Alex Majlaton. This is game 3 here.
With
in the
Alex
Jeskai mirror.
Not having a drop on 3, which is interesting. And you can see from his hand that he has at least a Negate, a Jeskai Charm, and it looks like a Mantis Rider. He just didn't play the Mantis Rider. It looks
that's not going to stop Ifro from playing his. He's in there.
I guess Alex is interested in maybe Jeskai Charming the Mantis Rider and only taking the 2. I think playing against removal is interesting, especially when you have cards like Negate. Maybe you want to wait to play Mantis Rider on 5 with Negate up. But when you get behind in the Jeskai mirror, it's pretty tough to get back ahead because, again, the cards all match up so well against each other. And Ifro is on the board first with a Secret Boy. Right.
Yeah, getting behind against this Jeskai deck is really nasty. I've seen people fall behind and not be able to catch up because they have to play spells that affect the board to try to get caught up, and then you get burned.
So it looks like back in our first match,
let's go back to our main match here. Yeah,
an interesting Thoughtseize occurring where Willie's Thoughtseizing Seth, and Seth could have cast Thoughtseize on turn 1 and declined to do so. And the reason for it is apparent. Seth has Nullify in hand, and he wants to have blue available on turn 2. And because he has none of his lands are dual lands, they're all polluted deltas that can get either black or blue, but not both. He declined a Thoughtseize turn 1, figuring, I think correctly, that it's just going to be live later.
Thoughts on 2 different artworks of polluted delta?
I would just use the old art. I actually like matching up my arts, so I would not do that. If it doesn't bother you, you're more than welcome to do so, but...
But it bothers you?
Yeah, I mean...
It bothers me too.
I don't know, if you've seen any of the videos I've done on Magic Online recently, now that Cons has come out, all the fetch lands I have are from Onslaught. I don't know, I find the old pictures to be quite fetching. So Willie's got to have a tough decision here because regardless of whether he takes Thoughtseize or Nullify, Seth's going to be able to deal with Willie's first threat. And so Willie might be taking the Thoughtseize because he wants to play a Planeswalker. Also because it forces Seth to keep Nullify mana up the whole time.
Yeah, and he can make him get an island where he's not going to have double black available for a while. Like Nullify is a little awkward, right?
It is, but the deck's mana requirements aren't so bad. It just needs blue, black, and it hits those pretty easily. It's got a lot of polluted deltas and temples of deceit and whatnot. One reason to not take Thoughtseize and to take Nullify instead is that Nullify forces Willie to waste a turn 2. Like, let's say Willie had Courser of Crewfix and Fleece Mainline in his hand. If he had taken the taken the Nullify, Seth would Thoughtseize 1, but then Willie would play the other. Now Willie has to tap mana for 1, get it countered, and then still have nothing on the board.
Right.
Nullify wastes both players' mana, but Willie, I think, has more to do with his mana than Seth does. That's the key difference.
It looks like Seth is just going to crack both polluted deltas here. He cracked one originally to get that second island.
Polluted Delta really powers up Dig Through Time. Look, Seth could, after he nullifies this Courser, he can cast a turn 4 Dig Through Time.
That is insane. And it looks like he's allowed the Courser to resolve here. Thoughts on that?
Well, I would assume that he's got an answer to it of some kind.
Okay.
Looks like maybe a Murderous Cut, the card I'm thinking here.
No, but then he has to take 2 cards out of his yard, so it puts that dig away. I guess he feels like he has enough to do in the meantime.
Yeah, and he didn't actually have a dig in his hand when we first saw it. So,
oh, he didn't?
No, he had a Prognostic Sphinx.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw a dig.
Yeah.
All right.
So he's got some time to find one, at which point his graveyard is going to be well stocked. And honestly, Seth's deck can tap 5 for dig, and it's really not that big of an issue, depending on what's going on.
Okay, here's a Thoughtseize, though, from Willie Adel. I saw a lot of Thoughtseizes get countered at the Pro Tour from this deck. A lot of the Pantheon guys were pretty consistently countering Thoughtseizes in scenarios like this. What goes into that?
Well, it's just situational. I mean, if your hand is Dissolve Hero's Downfall, you might as well just counter the Thoughtseize, then Hero's Downfall the next threat, instead of giving your opponent the option of what to play around. If your hand is Dissolve, you generally don't want to counter it because now you still have counter mana up. But if you only have one counter spell, then often you don't mind spending the mana. Basically, you're paying mana to make it so your opponent gets less information about your hand. And given the blue-black deck has a lot of situational cards, giving your opponent information is not great.
Yeah, what does he have here? Wow, lots of counter spells.
So Seth could have countered the Thoughtseize with Dissolve in order to maybe try to play a Prognostic Sphinx next turn. I like the way he played it, which is let Thoughtseize resolve. Sure, Willie can take the Sphinx, but then Seth has 3 counter spells in his hand, and he leaves shields up this turn.
Yes.
And that's the important part. He really does not want Willie resolving a threat this turn. Also, Seth just wants to draw Dig at some point regardless, and if he forces Willie to take Sphinx, I mean, this will buy Seth at least 3 or 4 draw steps plus a scry off Dissolve. That's a lot of shots to hit Dig and just kind of get the game to a point where you're multiple cards ahead.
He does miss the land drop here, Seth, but passes the turn back with, well, up to 2 counter spells up. And it looks like Willie just passed the turn back, and then Seth drew his card and just passed the turn back as well. So not a lot going on here. Willie's missing land drops.
Including land drops.
Yes.
So you definitely want to counter the Courser just because, first of all, you don't necessarily have an answer to it. Second of all, because you don't want Willie to get an extra shot at hitting a land.
You're going to nullify here? Yeah.
Nullify is the best use here because you can't Disdainful Stroke it, and Dissolve is a stronger card. You might as well use, and the mana doesn't seem to matter here, so you might as well use the weaker card. You want to be able to dissolve a Planeswalker, though you would actually Disdainful Stroke Planeswalkers to begin with.
All right, looks like he picked up a Temple of Deceit. Or no, actually, I think that's a Dismal Backwater. Yeah, Dismal Backwater. So
which is dismal compared to the Temple of Deceit.
Correct.
You would much rather scry here.
And there's a third Courser, a Crew Fix here for Willie Adel. Is this one going to resolve? It seems unlikely.
Whoa, Seth picked up some good cards. He picked up both Dissolve and Dig Through Time. So basically his 2 best cards. I don't mind countering this here. You have a good shot at digging into a removal spell, but I guess actually Seth can't quite cast Dig. He's got Murderous Cut and Nullify in his graveyard right now. Yeah, I would just dissolve this. I mean, again, you want to keep the board clear so your Dig Through Times do work.
All right, Seth Manfield taking a look at his scry, and is he going to keep that on top too? Jeez, lots of good stuff.
Willie
on the way for
slow rolling the land here, so he might not have cared about that Courser that much. I mean, it's good to play your lands post spell if you. There's no reason to give your opponent information. That actually can matter. Like, let's say Willie was casting like a Sylvan Caryatid. Maybe Seth would have countered that too because Willie's stuck on lands. Then Willie plays the land, making Seth wish he hadn't countered it.
Right. All right. There's a Thoughtseize,
which is a decent draw. It's not great in the sense that Willie's got a handful of cards, so Willie's choked on mana, not cards. But it is good in that it fuels your Dig. It gives you basically free disruption at no mana cost because it's just making Dig 1 cheaper.
So what is he going to take here? The Thoughtseize to protect his answers?
I would imagine you take Thoughtseize. You certainly don't take Hero's Downfall or Utter End, and assuming you can dig into answers to Wingmate Rock, even if Willie draws a untapped white source, plays a Wingmate Rock, you can dig into a way to kill it, and you have counters for the next one, so you can even take hits from the first one for a couple turns. I would be surprised if he did not take the Thoughtseize here.
Willie just sort of throws the Siege Rhino on the battlefield.
Seth getting to Disdainful Stroke it here.
Yep, and there it is. Willie looks a little unhappy with how things have
Here's where we see this card just go off.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, Dig Through Time is a ridiculous card. There's exactly enough cards now to make Dig just cost 2 mana. Seth just paid 2 mana. I mean, this card is not Sphinx's Revelation in that it doesn't incentivize the control decks, once they play their 8th land and cast it, they just win. But it's also a 2 mana draw 2 of your best 2 of your top 7, which is really powerful. I mean, that is not an effect that should cost 2 mana, and obviously you have to do some work to get it to, but that is a big reason why Blue Black's even a deck.
You're a game designer. What would you cost that at if it wasn't a variable cost like Delve? What would you just say? Let's say you wanted to make a standard playable card. You're pushing it a little bit. What would that cost?
I think you could cost it at 5 and it would be pushy. I mean, Jason Ingenuity and Dig at 5 straight up is like Treasure Cruise versus Dig, except they're both instants.
Right.
So I think you could actually cost it at 5 and it would be strong, but as is right now, it's way stronger.
Way better, right?
Yeah, because sometimes it costs 5, sometimes it costs 6, sometimes it costs 2.
Yeah, we just saw it for 2 right there.
Yeah, and again,
Seth Manfield looks like he's completely in the driver's seat here, as Willie Adel has no threats going, is missing land drops, doesn't have double white for Wingmate Rock, and Seth just played Dig Through Time.
And when Seth's deck has the luxury of casting Dig Through Time and selecting more Dig Through Times, then the game is, the writing's on the wall. Basically, if Seth's under so much pressure that he has to dig into 2 removal spells, that's very different than dig into a removal spell plus a dig, into a dig plus a whatever, and eventually into a dig plus a Prognostic Sphinx or just a Prognostic Sphinx. And, Willie, having drawn multiple removal spells that really don't do anything until the game's almost over anyway.
All right, well, Willie Adel's going to play an Obzon Charm here to try to find himself some more action. He's going to draw a couple cards and whiff again.
Well, I think what Willie did is pass the turn, and then during his end step, Seth digged. Willie let that resolve, then he drew 2 off Obzon Charm.
His opponent was tapped out.
I would be more inclined to just run out the Obzon Charm main phase, just because if Seth counters it, so be it, but you really want to hit your land drops. You have so many coming to play tap lands.
Yeah,
That being
that's
said,
what I thought happened, yeah. But
Willie is very far behind regardless.
All right, and there's the lands that he drew.
But it's a force to despise. It has to take Wingmate Rock here.
Yes. So what needs to happen for Willie Adel to win this game? He's throwing threats out there, but he knows that they're just going to get picked off. Seth, the only decision Seth has to make is, do I counter it or do I kill it with a removal spell? And that is just such a miserable spot if you're Willie Adel.
Yeah.
Is there a string of cards that can get him out of this realistically?
There is, only because Seth's deck kills so slowly. Seth technically could draw something like 7 or 8 land or bad spells in a row, and Willie could draw 7 good spells in a row. And that would actually do it. And maybe the number is a little smaller than 7, maybe it's like 5.
But that's absurd, right?
But we're talking 5%ers here.
Yeah, okay.
This isn't. I don't believe this is a 99% in Seth's favor, but I think it is above 90% in Seth's
What if Willie drew like running Thought Seizes and then stuck a Planeswalker or something? Is that something that could work?
That is the sort of thing that could do it.
Yeah.
And also, if Seth rations his removal well, like if he makes sure to keep counters for Planeswalkers and removal for the cards that need removal, with that while lining them up correctly, then that could also do it. But Seth's just casting another Dig Through Time.
How much more can Willie take is the question. It's going to take Seth quite a while to actually close this game out.
Yeah, maybe not as long as you might think. Pearl Lake Ancient has shown up.
Oh, hello. That's out of the sideboard for him?
Yeah, it looks like Seth boarded it in. Maybe he just needed more threats. He took Radiant Fountain to go with it. When Seth's taking Radiant Fountain over Hero's Downfall, then I think you're in a bad spot.
He's going to combo off, and there's the Radiant Fountain. Quick update from our secondary table there. Eric Froelich wins. He beats Alex Majleton 2-1.
He looked like he was ahead in the game we saw the second glimpse of. Seth choosing not to play Pearl Lake Ancient, potentially waiting until he can have Dissolve up. Willie's doing literally nothing, and Willie's choosing not to play Wingmate Rock, I think because he just wants to get 2 rocks off, and he's so far behind that getting 1 rock is not going to be good enough. Willie can now bounce 3 to 6 of Seth's lands, and Seth knows that. Seth choosing which 3 lands to return. I don't know if Seth returns it again. I think he might. If he has a Disdainful Stroke, that'll work out better. It looks like Willie actually has drawn double Hero's Downfall. The problem with returning 3 more lands is that you end up not being able to cast Pearl Lake Ancient for a long time, and you end up having to discard a bunch. So I think Seth correctly just kind of lets that happen. Basically, you traded Pearl Lake Ancient for 2 Hero's Downfalls, and you return some lands in the process, but there are some upsides to that.
So not unreasonable, but not great either, right? Those cards weren't going to be good against Seth anyway.
Right. Seth also could get into the spot where he stops playing lands just to have more cards to discard to Prognostic Sphinx. Not that that's super impressive, but the deck doesn't, again, there's no revelation in the deck. It doesn't need 10 lands out as much as it needs like 6 or 7.
But Dismal Backwater and Radiant Fountain gain you life, so
it's true.
Can't turn that
Seth's
down.
winning the life race by a lot, actually.
He is. Let's see if Willie has some plan lined up. He has hit a bunch of land drops. He can now cast all of his spells.
Oh yeah, he's for a long time he's been able to cast every spell in his deck or magic, but he just needs like one more mana confluence. But that's not going to help him very much because he doesn't have really what he needs to win this game. I mean, he needs a lot of threats. And given that Seth cast 3 dig through times, it seems difficult to end up in that spot.
So here's an Obzon Charm.
And I like the dissolve here, just because the way Seth loses is Willie drawing too many threats in a row. I mean, actually the way this game goes, now that the Pearl Lake Ancient got killed and Willie may have stocked up a few cards, I think it's looking a little better for Willie than it did 5 turns ago. That being said, it's still looking very bad for Willie.
So is he trying to overload Seth here?
Yeah, you would generally start by playing a spell end of turn because you're going to then untap and play another spell.
And that's what he did. He Obzon Charmed end step, and now he's playing a Siege Rhino with 2 cards left in his hand. And
one of which is a Wingmate Rock, the other which is an Utter End. So, and Seth knows that as well. So if Seth doesn't have an answer to Siege Rhino, he still has a good amount of time to figure it out. Looks like he does have an answer in Hero's Downfall, just to make sure a Wingmate Rock, doesn't get the raid trigger. This is where Blue-Black doesn't, lacks a good finisher though. If Seth waits too long, again, the nightmare scenario for him of land versus Willie's spell, it actually could happen. You give him enough time and you're going to hit this pocket of land that you can't get out of.
Right.
Unless, of course, he's casting another Dig Through time, in which case, or Pearl Lake Ancient, in which case he's in good shape. It's possible he should have waited on Pearl Lake Ancient even more, because he knew Willie had 2 removal spells, and if you're not going to fight over the second one, then maybe you end up wanting to just wait on that. Though I think what he expected was Willie to end up casting Utter End instead of second Hero's Downfall, and which he had Disdainful Stroke for.
Right. Now this is interesting. Here's Liliana Vest for Willie.
And that is one of the cards that can run away with the game. I mean, this is what I talked about with the removal lining up correctly. If Seth's hand right now is like Silence the Believers and Nullify, he could end up just losing to Liliana. And it looks like if there's a die coming out.
Yeah, so Liliana is going to get minus. That's going to allow Willie to get any card in his library and put it on top, so his next draw step can be whatever. And now he can start crafting how he wants the game to go, right? He has information. All right, here's Pearl Lake Ancient number 2, though, so Liliana not long for this world.
Seth having the second Pearl Lake Ancient makes this very difficult for Willie to win. Because
he's fighting, but this is pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Also, Willie, Seth Manfield with the Obzon sleeves there.
Yeah, taunting Willie. Willie has the actual Obzon sleeves.
Yeah.
There goes the Utter End. Willie basically needed Seth to not have Pearl Lake Ancient in his hand that one turn. But now that Seth does, it's actually going to be really tough for Willie to win, because Pearl Lake Ancient can actually kill Willie very quickly.
Yeah, I think he actually just hit Willie for 7 there.
Well, yeah, because he gets a prowess trigger.
He got a prowess trigger, and that sets up.
That sets up lethal next turn, and he can just counter Willie's next card, which is probably like a Siege Rhino or an Elspeth, or some kind of threat.
Yeah, I think Willie's actually at 6, not 7.
Ooh, Whip of Erebos. That is a good threat.
Can he get out of range? And also, does it resolve?
No, and that should be game.
That ought to do it. So Willie's going to try to grab something here, but is Willie actually at 7?
If he was at 13 before, he should be at 6.
He should be at 6.
But either way, Seth has to have, even if Willie's at 7, Seth has to draw no spells off the Jason Jr. that he can cast pre-combat. Yeah. Though granted, he doesn't have very many, but he could even just play a removal spell and counter it, and that would be enough.
Right.
And Willie still has to play his spell next turn and have it be something that saves him. So it looks like Willie was at 7. Maybe it's possible that Seth made him take 6. You can actually miss the prowess trigger, and that doesn't come up very often.
Even though he thought seize that turn.
Yeah.
All right, it was Elspeth that Willie went to go dig up, and it is not going to be enough here. Seth Manfield takes the match.